could hardly hold the old man back. Frantic, mad to go rushing out the Dardan gates, he begged them all, groveling in the filth, crying out to them, calling each man by name, "Let go, my friends, much as you care for me. Let me hurry out of the city, make my way, all on my own to Achaea's waiting ships. I must implore that terrible, violent man. Perhaps, who knows, he may respect my age." The poet is setting us up for the 24th book, right? "Respect my age, may pity an old man. He has a father too, as old as I am. Peleus sired him once." Peleus mentioned obviously in the opening line of this poem, right? "Peleus reared him to be the scourge of Troy, but most of all to me, he made my life a hell. So many sons he slaughtered, just coming into bloom. But grieving for all the rest, one breaks my heart the most, and stabbing grief for him will take me down to death. My Hector. Would to God he had perished in my arms. Then his mother who bore him, oh, so doomed. She and I could glut our souls with grief." We then have the chant of Hecuba. "What agonies," she says, "oh my child, my desolation. How can I go on living?" Sounding very much like Thetis early in the poem, talking about Achilles. What agonies. Remember, Thetis even said that I am agony. Must I suffer now? Now you are dead and gone. You were my pride throughout the city. Night and day, we're told. A blessing to us all. The men and women of Troy throughout the city, they saluted you. And again, here it is. Like a god, you were their greatest joy while you lived. Now death and fate have seized you, dragged you down. We're told at line 515, her voice rang out in tears. But the wife of Hector had not heard a thing. Of course, the obvious question is, why isn't she on the walls watching? Like, she has to have some sense that her man is fighting against Achilles. She doesn't want to see. No messenger brought the truth. We think, of course, of that messenger who had to bring, right, the message. Right, Nestor's son had to bring the message to Achilles about the death of Patroclus. No messenger brought the truth of how her husband made his stand outside the gates. She was weaving at her loom. Remember when we met Helen for the first time, she was weaving. Deep in the high halls, working flowered braiding into a dark red folding, and you can predict it. It's going to be a robe, isn't it? Robe. And she called her well-kept women through the house to set a large three-legged cauldron over the fire, so Hector could have his steaming hot bath when he came home from battle. Irony, right? Hey, let's draw a bath for Hector. Hector, who's being dragged, of course, by his heels back towards the Greek camp. Poor woman, the poet says. She never dreamed how far he was from bathing, struck down at Achilles' hand by blazing-eyed Athena. But she heard the groans and wails of grief from the rampart now, and her body shook. This language is very similar to what happened when Achilles learned about Patroclus' death. Her shuttle dropped to the ground. We're going to have some things dropping now. She called out to her lovely waiting women, "Quickly, two of you follow me. I must see." We're back to this thing about sight. Follow the way that sight happens here. "I must see what's happened." That cry, that was Hector's honored mother, I heard. My heart's pounding, leaping up in my throat, the knees beneath me paralyzed. Oh, I know it. These are exactly the lines, of course, that are echoed by Achilles when he's waiting, right, to be told by Antilochus that, yeah, Patroclus is dead. Something terrible's coming down on Priam's children. Note the irony of this. Priam's children, not Priam's child. Of course, there's another child, and it is Paris, right? By extension, obviously, the rest of the children of Troy, right? Pray God the news will never reach my ears. And then the word yes. Notice, it's been like a mantra, the word yes. Yes, but I dread it so. What if great Achilles has cut my Hector off from the city, darling Hector, and driven him out across the plain, and all alone? The genius of this chapter, I mean, it's unbelievable, it's undeniable, the genius of this book, right, this chapter. Notice, what if he's out there all alone? Of course, we know that he was all alone at the beginning, right? He may have put an end to that fatal, headstrong pride. This is Andromache, this is his wife saying, my man was very headstrong and very proud. We know it because, of course, Hector himself admitted it, that always sees my Hector, never hanging back with the main force of men, always charging ahead, giving ground to no man in his fury. We think of fury, we think of rage, we think of rage, we think of Achilles. So she cried, line 540, dashing out of the royal halls like a mad woman, her heart racing hard, her women close behind her. But when she reached the tower where soldiers massed, she stopped on the rampart. Remember, she was on the rampart earlier. Remember when Hector came back to Troy to find her, she wasn't in her room. She wasn't weaving. She was out on the rampart watching. Now she's in her room. And now she's left her room. And now she is on the rampart and looked down and saw it all. Back to sight. Saw Hector dragged before the city. Stallions galloping, dragging Hector back to Achaea's feet. Warships. Ruthless work. The world went black as night before her eyes. She fainted, falling backward, gasping away her life breath as if she's dead. She flung to the winds her glittering headdress. Right? And again, this kradimna is the Greek word for this headdress, this veil, which also seconds as the meaning in the Greek language for the walls of Troy. And scholars have pointed out, it can also mean that if a man was going to take a woman violently, sexually, it would be depicted in paintings or drawings as removing of the veil. She flung to the winds her glittering headdress, the cap and the coronet, braided band and veil, all the regalia golden Aphrodite gave her once, the day that Hector, helmet aflash in sunlight, led her home to Troy from her father's house with countless wedding gifts to win her heart. The veil falls. But crowding round her now, her husband, sisters, and brothers, wives supported her in their midst, and she, terrified, stunned to the point of death, struggling for breath now and coming back to life, burst out in grief among the Trojan women. And now we have Andromache's soliloquy, which is some of the most compelling language in all of poetry. The grieving, the reality, it's over. Oh, Hector. Line 516. I am destroyed. She begins with herself. She moves to her son, and then obviously, ultimately, to all of Troy. Both born to the same fate after all. You at Troy in the halls of King Priam. I at Thebes under the timberland of Plycos at Eden's house. She goes back to the fact that she was where she was born. He raised me as a child, that man of doom, his daughter just as doomed. Would to God he'd never fathered me. Notice how often we've heard that, right? And then she says it. Now you go down to the house of death, the deep depths of the earth, and leave me here to waste away in grief, a widow, lost in the royal halls. And the boy, Astyanax, only a boy, the son we bore together, you and I, so doomed. Hector, what help are you to him? Now you are dead. Hector never mentioned his son, really, in that soliloquy. But here he is. We obviously think of that in your junior year, right? We studied Arthur Miller's The Crucible. And John Proctor, this is that challenge for him to tear up that paper and to go to the scaffolding at the end. He realizes that he's sacrificing for a virtue, but he's leaving behind sons, children, that now will have no father. And she says it. Hector, what help are you to him? Now you're dead. What help is he to you? Think, even if he escapes, we know that he won't, right? Achilles' son, Neoptolemus, will throw him from the walls of Troy, as mythology will tell us. Even if he escapes the wrenching horrors of war against the Argives, pain and labor will plague him all his days to come. Strangers will mark his lands off, stealing his estates. The day that orphans, a youngster cuts him off from friends, and he hangs his head low, humiliated in every way, his cheeks stained with tears. We think about the challenges of the orphan here, right? And pressed by hunger, the boy goes up to his father's old companions, tugging at one man's cloak, another's tunic, and some will pity him, true. And one will give him a little cup to drink, enough to wet his lips, not quench his thirst. But then some bully, with both his parents living, beats him from the banquet, fists and abuses flying. Yo, get out, you've got no father feasting with us here. And the boy, sobbing, trails home to his widowed mother. And then she says his name for the first time. Astyanax. And years ago, propped on his father's knee, he would only eat the marrow, the richest cuts of lamb, and when sleep came on him, and he had quit his play, cradled warm in his nurse's arm, he'd drowse off, snug, in a soft bed, his heart brimmed with joy. It's so compelling to realize what it is that Hector has left behind. Achilles has none of this, right? I mean, his son is off somewhere, he doesn't even know where. Hector has lost a lot. Now, what's suffering? And this word suffering is central, right? Now, he's lost his father. And then she says it for the second time. Astyanax, the lord of the city, so the Trojans called him, because it was you, Hector, you and you alone, we're back to the word alone, who shielded the gates and the long walls of Troy. But now by the big ships, far from your parents, glistening worms will wriggle through your flesh. We're all food for worms. Once the dogs have had their fill of your naked corpse, though we have such stores of clothing laid up in the halls, we are again thinking about the robes, right? Fine things, a joy to the eye, the work of women's hands. Now by God, she says, I'll burn them all the robes, blazing to the skies. The symbolism is powerful here. No use to you now. They'll never shroud your body, but they will be your glory, burned by the Trojan men and women in your honor. Her voice rang out in tears, and the women wailed in answer. What a compelling way to finish the 22nd book of Iliad. Let's jump now quickly to levels 2 and 3. At 2a, well, obviously the phrase, you can run but you can't hide, is born actually in this scene. The scales of Zeus, obviously fate and destiny, when it's your time to go, another major message here. How about this message? It's always the ones left behind who suffer the most. Right? Think of it. Patroclus killed, Achilles suffers. Hector killed, his parents, his wife, obviously Astyanax, his son, suffering. How about this theme or message? The gods lie, they deceive, and it's accepted within this text. Of course, we've pointed out before that St. Augustine knew this text very well. So when he picked up biblical text and began to read it, he had to deal with this idea of a God who lies or deceives. For example, he could go to a passage like 1 Kings 22:22, right? Where we're told God lies or deceives. 2 Chronicles 18:22, Jeremiah 4:10, Jeremiah 27, Ezekiel 14, verse 9, 2 Thessalonians 2:11, all from biblical texts suggesting at times deity can lie. Of course, Augustine knew this question. He had answers, by the way, to this question. I'll let you research that on your own. At level 2b, the symbolism is, I think, self-evident. Achilles represents a man apart and alone. Hector, a man of community until alone at the end. Ostracized or somehow cut off from community. The obvious question is, where is Paris? I think the poet wants you to ask that question, which is why I think from book 13 on, Paris is not mentioned. He wants you to constantly be reminded, all of this happened because Paris brought home Helen. Broke the rules, if you will, of community by taking a woman who was married to another man and brought her back to the city of Troy. The obvious question is why Priam immediately didn't send Paris back with this woman to solve that problem. It didn't happen, and obviously the fallout is self-evident, right? Right. Think about the other similarities and contrasts between Achilles and Hector as symbols themselves. The list could go on and on and on, right? For example, Achilles will fight against the realities of life. Hector will accept them because that's the way that it is, right? In terms of irony, and we've been talking about irony throughout our study of the Iliad, probably no more brutal ironies than those that are going to be here represented. And it's in this book, obviously, that the symbolism and the irony begin to come together in profound ways. I mean, I've already mentioned this idea of the veil of Andromache, as well as, of course, the veil of Mama Hecuba that falls, right? And that Greek word, kadimna, that has everything to do with both the veil as well as the walls of Troy, as well as the virginity of a woman, and all of those kinds of things are subsumed in the falling of the veil. Of course, the irony as well is that the gods helped Hector, and then, of course, ultimately Jack Hector. Apollo left him alone. We're in that line. At 3a, I've already given you that list of all of those texts that somehow reference this. I won't go through that list again. But think of it. This is maybe the ultimate fight scene of all fight scenes and the fallout to follow, right? The final words in Beowulf, of Beowulf 3 will come to mind. What is your favorite text, movie, TV show, maybe game, that demonstrates this passing of a friend? Boromir's death in Lord of the Rings comes to mind, right, as Peter Jackson's films, as that profound, profound moment when you can't help but just feel powerfully the death, the passing of a warrior, of a hero. The last words of a dying person is a motif in a lot of texts, right? Think about it. Even, for example, and St. Augustine will have obviously made this connection as well. Think about, for example, Christ on the cross and his 7 last sayings. Luke 23, right, 34, forgive them for they know not what they do. Or how about Plato's Apology? The last words before he dies, the unexamined life is not worth living. Or his final words in the Phaedo, in Plato's Phaedo of Socrates, right? Remember to pay for the rooster. By the way, those you can find those lectures in the Harvard Classics at learnstrong.net, right? Finally, at 3b, how are we going to own a text like this? Oh, well, I've spent quite a bit of time with the language because I want you to somehow connect with this text. So what do you think? Is it a fitting end? Climactic or anticlimactic? Why? Why not? Fair end? Right? So, for example, think of this. Achilles prays to Zeus because he loses his time, his Scooby snack, his Briseis, right? And Zeus, through Thetis, says, okay. So the Greeks get jacked, including Patroclus. And for that, Hector and the city of Troy will go down. I mean, where's the justice in this? What do you think? What bothers you about Athena's deception? Right? What bothers you about the ways that the gods behave in the Iliad? Of course, the question that maybe as well we could ask is, what do you think about where is Paris? Where is Helen? Neither are here. What are they, back in their room? Are they on the walls? Why doesn't the poet mention them? What are your thoughts? Finally, at 3b, what was a time you knew you were going to lose and you competed or you fought anyway, and therefore heroic, right? I mean, I'm reminded of that student who was a great golfer, terrific golfer for us, but he was having a terrible day in the tournament, and he was done. He was done. It was at the end, and he was done. He literally was walking off the green to the car to leave when he was met by his father. It was our whirling tournament here. And the father met him and said, what are you doing? And he said, I'm no good today. I'm leaving. And the father said, you can't do that. It's not just. It's not right. And the son said, don't give me some garbage. And he said, no. Think about it. If you stay out there and go down dead last, which you are right now, correct? Yeah, I am dead last. Right? You're a great golfer, but you're dead last, correct? Right, I'm last. If you stay out there and go down dead last, then a young man is going to get to go home tonight and say, at least I didn't come in dead last. If you leave, that young man will have to go home and say, I came in dead last. You owe it to that young man who can be able to go home and say, at least I wasn't dead last. You owe it to him. That's the right thing to do. The young man telling me later, he said, I knew my old man was right. I hated that he was right. And I went back and finished because he was right. I owed it to him. Just because in other tournaments, I had come in first. Here I was having a terrible day. And of course, we all know how mental the game of golf is, right? Remember what Longfellow said? In this world's broad field of battle, Psalm of Life. In the bivouac of life, be not like dumb driven cattle, be a hero in the strife. What was a time when you were a hero in the strife and you went up against odds and you knew you were probably going to lose, but you did it anyway? Well, there you go, book 22. It's a compelling book. I'm glad that you've been able to hang with me through. It's a long lecture, but I think it's worth it for us to have spent the time. Now we turn to book 23, and the ironies will continue. Now that Hector is dead, Achilles will want to do a mini Olympic Games. No, we're going to have a sporting event. Right? This poem continues to teach us about ourselves and our world. Think about it. After the 9/11 experience that was so horrific for our country, there were a lot of sporting events. which were so important in the rehabilitation of the national psyche. Why is it that often in great tragedy, we need that kind of escape of some kind of athletic or artistic kind of performance? Well, we're going to see it in book 23 in the games, the funeral games for Patroclus. I hope that you'll come back. I hope you're growing and learning through this experience. I know that I am. Thank you.